Up in the sky. It's a bird. It's a plane. No, it's a brand new podcast coming straight at you from your host, Nolan Dean. With me, I have a very special guest for the upcoming Movies and Me podcast. This is not a movie review show. Each week, I will be getting you a new guest who will pick a movie that has a personal meaning to them, and then we'll talk about it like any movie fan would. My first guest hails from Missouri, USA, and is one of the biggest Superman fans I know, so naturally he picked this movie. Please welcome Mr. Billy Pollihan.
Wow, you were not kidding with that intro. Hi. Hi, Nolan. I just wanted to say that, I am a huge Superman fan, and I'm intentionally raising my voice higher because that's what Clark Kent does. And now I'm just gonna talk regular. Anyway, I'm very excited, and I love Superman.
Yeah, when I announced this podcast that what we were going to do was take movies that had a personal meaning to people, I knew immediately with you it was either going to be King Kong 1933 or this one. And either one I would have been fine with rewatching, but Superman the movie, when it comes down to it, when people think of great superhero movies, you usually think like Spider-Man 2, The Avengers, The Dark Knight, 89 Batman, and Christopher Reeve's Superman. He's ultimately what Superman is to a lot of people. So, Billy, I gotta know, since you're such a big Superman fan, what is it about this movie specifically that gives it such a personal connection to you as a film fan and as a Superman fan?
Well, it was one of the earliest films that I ever watched as a young boy. Okay, how do I describe this? I had known about Superman, but I was always curious, and I had never seen the movie. Like, I had seen the images, of course, like, of Christopher Reeve with the split curl and all that, and I was very curious as, I don't even know when I saw it, but all I know is as soon as I popped it in and that John Williams score played, I knew I was in for something pretty unique. And not only that, but an amazing title sequence that is just one of the most unique. And it's Richard Donner's Superman.
Absolutely. I mean, that title sequence, like, I don't need to play a soundbite of the theme tune. If you know Superman at all, you know what that theme tune is. But I'm pretty sure someone will end up humming it by the end of this episode. If we don't, I'm sorry, but come on, you gotta know what the Superman movie tune is. And I'm a firm believer that anything with a John Williams soundtrack immediately raises its quality. Doesn't even matter if it's a bad movie or not. John Williams could make Jurassic Park 2 feel good. He just makes Superman even better with this kind of quality that he gives to the character, because you automatically think of that theme tune whenever you think of Superman. You think of him ripping his shirt open, going through the telephone box and everything. And I want to talk specifically about Reeve's portrayal of the character. A lot of people feel that he is the definitive portrayal of Superman, and we've gotten quite a few Superman performances in the last couple of years. What's your take on that? Is Reeve your Superman?
Oh, definitely Reeve is my Superman. And he is my Superman for a lot of reasons. One, he is just the epitome of what it is to be a good person. Like, he will always do the right thing no matter what the cost. And even if he's somehow put into a situation where he can't, he would always try to find the solution first. And that's one of the things that a lot of people had problems with in Man of Steel, is that he would think like a young man would have. Like, he would think like if we had these powers. And yeah, Superman's supposed to be better than us, but this was a more realistic take, which is what I liked. But Christopher Reeve was the Boy Scout, which is funny because I am a Boy Scout.
Nice little fun fact there.
And just he had an infectious smile, beautiful blue eyes. He gained so much weight, like muscle, and he trained with David Prowse. So David Prowse was Darth Vader, and just you can't help but just wanna impress this guy. And not only that, his portrayal of Clark Kent is completely different from Superman. Like, you understand why nobody would buy Clark Kent as Superman, this mild-mannered dork, honestly. I mean, the Honest Trailer says it best. He is also a mild-mannered dork when he's Superman, but he always just brings out the best in me, just inspires me to do good, and that is why Christopher Reeve will always be my Superman.
I mean, yeah, when you watch Christopher Reeve, like, I know a lot of people have this thing, like, oh my god, why can't people recognize Superman? All he does is take his glasses off, but they don't take into account the persona of Clark Kent really is the mask of Superman. Superman, I feel, is like who he really is, but he has to hide that in order to keep his identity secret, and for a lot of other reasons as well, I'm sure you can put in on. Specifically, the opening of this movie, I remember it being the most boring part when I watched it as a kid, but on a rewatch, I noticed so many things about Marlon Brando's portrayal of Jor-El. When he's talking to Zod, and he's talking about how Krypton is going to be dying and giving him an option to join him, when you see how the other members treat Jor-El, you can almost see, like, he's completely conflicted here. He's almost toying with the idea of joining up with Zod, and that made it a lot more interesting on a rewatch. And we know Marlon Brando did some crazy things on the set, so yeah, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, Marlon Brando was always somewhat of a professional. The only thing that he didn't really do professionally was remember his lines, and he always thought that that would get a better reaction, like, if it was kind of sporadic. Like, Apocalypse Now, he had an earpiece with Francis Ford Coppola feeding him the lines, but I did notice that as well. I noticed that he's trying to remain very stoic, but you understand, because him and Zod, you can tell these guys were friends, and you understand Zod's point of view as well. Like, these council members treat him like dirt, and they make up their own rules, apparently, and so he tried to stage a coup, but Jor-El is conflicted between duty and friendship, and you get that in the opening, which Marlon Brando, he just does a great job. The only real gripe is that he doesn't pronounce Krypton correctly. He just always says Krypton. That really bugged me for a long time. But, like, when you look at him, you know, the white hair, he's also got a split curl, and it was his idea to put the crests on the chest, so you can identify, like, the different houses of Krypton, which was a very clever idea, and it's an idea that's been used. Again, take, for example, Man of Steel. All of those crests, they're different, and yet you can identify somebody by their house, and just, you can tell he doesn't want to send his son away, but he knows that this planet it's doomed.
He really has no choice in the end.
Pretty much. And even the music plays an important part as well. When you hear the Krypton theme, it sounds like something godlike, you know, like Mount Olympus, but it also signifies, it's like, oh, look at this past glorious planet, and it's gonna die soon. You get that all within the music as well.
Yeah, and that's partly what John Williams does in this movie that makes it so great. I want to move on to something that I'm sure I'm going to be conflicted on when we're answering it, but despite this movie having a lot of great scenes, I want you to talk about what's your favorite scene in this movie that just encompasses why it's got such a connection.
I would think it's the first time he rips open his shirt, turns into Superman.
I was hoping you were going to say that.
And it is the helicopter scene. And I chose this over the night flying scene. Very, like, it was a hard decision to make, because those are the two best scenes in the movie, without a doubt. But it shows Superman saving, like, a bunch of people. He does a bunch of stuff. He doesn't just save the helicopter. He stops criminals on a boat. He stops a guy from breaking in. He saves a woman, I believe, from I think it was the helicopter as well, because Lois Lane was in that helicopter, and just you got a little bit of their banter, like I forget what it was, but he's like,
Easy, miss. I've got you.
oh yeah, no, he's like, hold on to me, and then she's like, hold on to you, or like, who's holding on to you? Like, can't believe that he's flying, because this is the first time that he's shown himself to the public, and he's already just this amazing guy. Oh yeah, he even saves the cat from a tree.
That's like a classic thing with Superman.
The very classic thing from any old Golden Age Superman comic is that he saves a cat from a tree, or he does menial stuff. I don't even know if that's a word, but he does very simple things. And he does it all with just this big goofy smile and optimistic personality that you can't help but just be like, yo, you do what you do, man.
I must say, with that scene, I do love that they kind of make fun of Superman in a way in that scene, because you see him go run past a phone booth, which I believe he used to do it in the comics. I could be wrong on this, please correct me if I am, but he would change into his uniform in a phone booth, but he kind of looks at it, and it's like a sort of a modern day for that era, and he's just like, what? I can't change in this. So we get this great shot of him just running, ripping his shirt, and when that theme kicks in, I want to say it's like he becomes a different person, but he kind of is that person. The person he's pretending to be is Clark Kent, and he just has this complete charm when he becomes Superman. It's just, I often rewatch that scene on YouTube quite a lot.
Oh yeah, and what's funny is the pimp that's right outside the revolving doors, because that's where he actually changes first. He changes in the revolving doors, like he uses his super speed and everything, and then the pimp is just like, "Damn, son," and I'm just like, "Oh, in the '70s,
that's a bad outfit."
Pretty much. But it's also great because it's like Lois Lane just can't catch a break. She's just got bad luck everywhere she goes. It doesn't matter what she does. Again, she could be flying a plane or a helicopter, or I don't know, she's being kidnapped, and Superman's always got to save her, but he is always happy to do so. And to hammer in the point of Clark Kent and Superman, when Clark Kent, I'm using quotations here, goes on a date with Lois,
which is really wonderful.
It's the setup to the night flying scene. She has to interview Superman first. You see when he's Clark Kent, he's a little hunched over, his voice is a little bit higher, he's got the glasses, he's very clumsy, like to a ridiculous degree. And then when he's Superman, he stands up, he uses his voice, he's got all this confidence. That's another thing, the confidence. When he's Clark Kent, he's just like, he's that one dorky guy that you want to be more confident, but when he's Superman, he's like, no, I'm here to get stuff done. How are you, Miss Lane? All that stuff. And
I like that they have a bit of banter within that scene as well, like really friendly banter.
Oh, it's incredible. It's one of the best things in the movie is the banter between Christopher Reeve and Margot Kidder. You could tell that these actors had amazing chemistry on and off camera, and it's one of the reasons why I love that relationship. And really, Lois Lane asks him, "Who are you?" And he just responds, "A friend." And that's, to me, is what Superman should eventually get to in these new movies, but that is Superman. He is a friend to everybody.
That's what we're hopeful for.
Unless you're Lex Luthor.
Yes.
Or any of his enemies.
And
but, yeah.
Before we get on to Lex Luthor, which I've got quite a few opinions on in this movie specifically, I want to talk about a scene that really spoke to me when I was rewatching it, but I always remember not liking that we didn't get more from this relationship. And that's the scene with Clark Kent and Jonathan Kent in the beginning. They're just walking up the farm. You can tell Jonathan Kent has a bit of a heart problem. And spoiler alert, but if you haven't seen Superman by now, why not? Jonathan Kent dies. And Superman in a later scene, well, Clark Kent in a later scene says, all these powers, all these things I can do, and I couldn't save him. And that to me is why Superman is such a great character, because he does have all these great abilities, and a lot of people think like, oh, how do you make that kind of person relatable? A simple thing like cholesterol, Superman can't save that. He won't be able to save everybody. He's a god. He will likely outlive most of the human species, but he so badly wants to be human that it makes him a really relatable character. And specifically there, I do wish we got more of Jonathan Kent and Clark Kent's relationship, but that one scene in particular is so powerful that on my rewatch I was like, we don't need it. We have it completely with this. And that was one of my flaws with Man of Steel, that instead of opting for the heart, they chose to just do an action scene, which didn't really blend with me so well as much as I wanted it to. But since you're such a big Superman fan, what's your thoughts on the whole like Clark Kent, Jonathan Kent relationship in this movie as opposed to any other portrayal of him?
Well, no, I think it's great because you can just tell they have a good relationship with each other. Like, Jonathan is always encouraging Clark to be better, and that is who he should be. And Clark is just confused as a teen, because he's just a teenager in high school who's getting picked on, and I mean, he has to carry all their gear, and he can't even ask the girl he likes out, but he knows that he can kick their asses anytime he wants.
But he holds back so much on it, and that makes you relate to him. Because you want to do that to your bullies, but you have to hold back.
Oh, yeah, and the thing, I've always preferred the heart attack. They did it in Smallville as well. The Smallville relationship of Clark and Jonathan is very much like Superman, the movie, where there is some problems with it, like, as any father-son relationship should be. But you can tell that they love each other no matter what. And, yeah, it shows a very simple thing, that even life can out-trump someone as powerful as Superman.
Which is what makes him so relatable. Go on, yeah. Man of Steel.
Now, Man of Steel, I get they were trying to do something new with it. And him dying in a tornado, I have mixed feelings on. Because I understand why he's like, no, don't save me. Don't show these powers. Don't put yourself, the world is not ready for you yet. But you can see on Henry Cavill's face that he just so desperately just wants to. And like when he lets out that yell, it's just like, oh shit, man.
It did invoke a reaction when I saw it, but ultimately on thinking about it, the problem is that it tries to do too much, whereas the one in this movie is just so simple and so sudden that it hits you more.
Oh no, I agree with you, and I will always prefer the heart attack Jonathan Kent death to the tornado one. Even though I totally get it, but I will always prefer the heart attack. And I like them both for different reasons, which is what's so great about this character, is that he's been interpreted so many times that if you don't like one version, that's great. You can just go to another one. And for a lot of people, they always go to the Christopher Reeve version. And they hold on to that version so passionately that they don't want to see anybody else do it. And like Christopher Reeve set such a standard that he put this character up on a pedestal that really is impossible for anybody to do or to get up to that level. They can try, and they have.
Oh yeah, and speaking of levels, we spoke about him before, but let's bring him up again. Let's talk about Gene Hackman's Lex Luthor. Where do you stand on this take on the character?
Honestly, it's just it's very silly. I mean, originally, people don't seem to remember this, but Lex Luthor, when he started out, he was just this very silly teenager with this long red hair and was a super genius, essentially. But he wasn't like calculating or manipulative or any of the stuff that we know Lex Luthor is today. He was just a kid. And I mean, I see most of that with Gene Hackman, but he shouldn't do that. I mean, there are some things that he does that are pretty dastardly, but he's basically playing an old-timey villain that, yeah, you could tell Gene Hackman he wasn't getting into it. And he's one of the best actors, and he makes it work. Like, he's memorable for sure, but as a modern Lex Luthor, he falls way flat.
He does have one great scene which does accompany the Lex Luthor that I like, because Lex Luthor's my favorite comic book villain. Like, the idea of Superman and Lex Luthor's relationship is so vast. You can do so many things with it, because Superman's essentially a god that wants to be a human, and Lex Luthor is this human who wants to be a god. And there's this one scene in the movie where Superman confronts Luthor for the first time, and it's a really good conversation, but I love that Luthor outsmarts Superman. Because that was the most Lex Luthor-y thing that I felt he did in the movie. Otherwise, he's just like an average comic book villain. There's nothing really that special about him, but that one particular moment does stand out.
I do like that he tricked him into opening up the chest of lead or the box of lead with kryptonite in it. He did trick him into doing that, and that's one of the things I like, is that he really does outsmart people. He always has a plan, and he always seems to be good with it. But like the bumbling stuff with Otis and Ned Beatty, it's hilarious and it's so out of place. And then there's Miss Tessmacher, who's just there to be eye candy, seriously.
And for Lex Luthor to yell her name.
Yes, which he does very much. But yeah, Lex is just sort of average. And also it didn't help the fact that the Lex Luthor we know is typically a bald man, and Gene Hackman refused to shave his head. Until like the very end where he was forced to shave his head.
Yeah, my thing with him is that this Lex Luthor, like, it's fine. It works as a villain in this movie because it's kind of cheesy and it's kind of fun, but he brags about being the best criminal mind of all time, which to me is not what Lex Luthor is. Lex Luthor doesn't think he's a criminal. He's a guy, at least from the comics I've read, who thinks that he's doing good by going after Superman. He so desperately wants to prove himself because ultimately, at the core, he's a really insecure guy. And with Hackman, he just feels like he's way too overconfident, smarmy, and full of himself, which is a part of Lex Luthor, but there wasn't really much of a layer to Hackman's portrayal of the character. And that might be because of the script, that might be because of his performance, but I do think you've seen better Lex Luthors in Superman-related media.
Yeah, because Lex Luthor, let's be fair, he's always had an ego. He's had an ego as big as Tony Stark from Iron Man. But the thing is, he always keeps his ego in check. That's what people fail to understand about Lex Luthor. Or that is what people also like about Lex Luthor, is that he is this smart-ass guy who does know what he's doing, but he doesn't brag about it a lot. And like he's like, oh yeah, I'm smarter than you. He's going to be like so nonchalant about it. And yeah, Gene Hackman is not that guy. It's very dated because there's one thing in this film that will always be a problem for some people, is that it's very dated. Like, you can tell this was made in the 1970s. Some of the effects do not hold up. Some of the effects.
But the charm of it holds up, and that's really what matters.
And the magic hold up. There's just this magic where everybody was well cast. Even Gene Hackman, he was still well cast. They did a good job. Everybody just seemed to be having a great time. And I actually got to meet the guy who played Jimmy Olsen, Mark McClure, and I just was like, that must have been something special. And he's like, oh yeah. And he said the same thing about Christopher Reeve. He was a Superman off camera as well. He was just the nicest guy. And for me, that was Christmas. I mean,
that sounds like a great time, like meeting Mark McClure. And I mean, Jimmy Olsen doesn't really do much in this movie, but he's an integral part to the Superman mythos.
very, very much so. And I mean, you can do it without him, but you feel it's much better if Jimmy Olsen is there, because Superman needs a pal. And why not just the photographer for the place he works at, who happens to work with the woman that he loves?
And a nice segue there. I really love Margot Kidder's Lois Lane. She is so hyper confident. She does what she wants. She doesn't care what people think, but she will always try to get the job done. And Margot Kidder's Lois Lane is to me what Lois Lane should be. I haven't quite got there with Amy Adams, sadly, but Kidder, you're not going to get any more perfect casting for Lois Lane in the 70s. She just absolutely killed it.
Yeah, I really can't imagine anybody else. And this is the role that she is associated with most. And what Lois Lane is essentially, she's a reporter. She always wants the story out, and she wants to tell the truth, which is the best part about her, is that she will always dig for the truth no matter what the cost is. I see that with Amy Adams. I get why other people do not do that, but she's also very spunky. Like, she does not take shit lightly. She argues with Perry White all the time.
Right, Chief?
Because of their ideological differences. Like, Perry White just wants a story. He doesn't care if it's the truth. And Lois Lane wants the true story, no matter what it costs. And it's hilarious, too, how confident she is. It's also her fatal flaw, because it gets her into a lot of trouble. And also, she can't spell. For whatever reason, she always has to be corrected for spelling, which is hilarious and is something that pretty much every Lois Lane has had since Margot Kidder.
Sadly, I don't think typewriters have spell checks.
No, they do not. And if you mess up on a typewriter, it sucks.
Okay, I think we've covered most basics here, but just before we close off, I want to end this with a little feature here. In case there's a likelihood that anyone has not seen this movie, because I'm creating this show to not only give people a platform where they can talk about the movies they are passionate about, but also to let people know that this movie should be watched. So imagine that I have never seen Superman the movie. Imagine I'm walking into like a comic book store, really hopeful and looking for something great to see. What do you tell me? What do you tell me that gets me wanting to buy this movie?
You want to see the grandfather of the modern superhero age, where everybody looks up to this film with such high regard. There's a reason for it, and it's just something you need to see to believe. I mean, even if there are ridiculous things, like I said, the pimp, or some of the bad jokes like Good Vibrations, or even the infamous spinning the world backwards and somehow making time go backwards in order to save Lois Lane's life, which is also a very ballsy thing to do, is to kill Lois Lane in the first film. But he goes back in time, just makes it all worth it, and you ignore it. But if you want to be charmed and you just want to go into this fantasy world where a man can fly, shoot lasers out of his eyes, has immeasurable strength, and is just... he's pretty much a god, then I would say watch this film. You will love it. And if you don't, honestly, I don't know what to say. You just have either an overcritical mind or you don't have a heart. Like, I get why you don't like some of it, but you can't say that Christopher Reeve isn't Superman. That character, everyone knows almost as much as Jesus Christ. That's how famous... No, seriously. That's how famous this character is. And if you want to know what people love, hate, and root for, I would say watch this film.
I think that's a great note to end off of. Billy, just before you go, I want to know, how do you feel about being the first ever guest on Movies and Me?
Oh, I'm pumped, dude. I would love to come back on. There are some films that are very personal for me for one reason or another, and this film was very personal for me as a kid, just getting into the movies and superheroes and just falling in love with one of my favorite characters all time, and just be able to say that in a podcast format with a good buddy of mine is
Thank you.
an amazing thing, and I can't wait for more of these, dude.
Well, there is always an option you come back, because obviously there's got to be more than one movie that you're passionate about, but I think that'll wrap us up for this episode. Billy, where can the good people find you?
You can find me at BBusterBill on Twitter. All B's are capital. You can find me on Facebook at Billy Pollihan, and you can find me also Blockbuster Bill on Instagram, except these are all lowercase b's. I made sure that was different. And overall, just give me a follow or send me a tweet, and I'd be happy to hit you up and just talk movies and meet new people.
And as always, you can follow me at Nolan Dean 27, and please use the hashtag Movies and Me if you want to continue the conversation on. If you want to talk more Superman the movie, please don't hesitate to get in touch with us. And if you want to be a guest on this show and talk about a movie that is just passionate to you, just hit me up a tweet. We'll sort something out, and we'll have a great time. And next week, I can confirm Morgan Robinson will be joining us, talking about a movie that I saw for the first time today, Once Upon a Time in America. And I'm very excited to talk about that with him, so stay tuned for that. And if you like this podcast, click the subscribe button, and I will see you guys next time.